Is a good drawing the foundation of good art? In today's video, I'm going to walk you through this detailed floral composition, and then we're going to use this illustration to create 3 pieces of art using 3 very different mediums. Hey friends, welcome back. My name is Shayda Campbell, and on this channel we make art and it's fun, not scary. Today, I have something really exciting to share. Not only am I going to walk you through every step of creating this lovely coneflower or echinacea drawing. I think it's perfect for autumn. I'm seeing echinacea everywhere right now. We're going to talk about composition and illustration and how to set up a sketch. And then we're going to take that illustration that we've worked through, but we're going to work with watercolor as well as colored pencils. What I really want to show is that having a sketch set up ahead of time and being confident in your composition, it can help you explore new mediums that otherwise might seem intimidating. But before we begin, I would like to mention that I have a beginner level floral illustration e-course launching on October 1st. I've been meaning to do an illustration e-course for years now, and I get a lot of requests for this type of content. So I am so excited to say that we are working on the finishing touches. It will be launching October 1st. And leading up to that date, we're doing a very exciting pre-sale. The pre-sale price is the lowest it will ever be. Head to shaydacampbell.com now, click e-courses and check it out. It's also part of some of the watercolor bundles, and that's the lowest price that those bundles will ever be. So head over there, take a look, and purchase now to get that incredible price. Our 3 pieces of art will all start with one pencil sketch. We'll turn that pencil sketch into a pen and ink drawing, and then we'll use that drawing to create a template for the other art pieces. So working in your sketchbook, or whatever paper you like to use for your pen drawings, you're going to sketch out a little rectangle. Keep that rectangle fairly small, and then finalize it by going over everything with a ruler. Now that we've got our little rectangle, we're going to create a guide for the coneflower or echinacea sketch. Now these coneflowers are sort of triangular in shape, so draw a rounded triangle everywhere that you want to place a coneflower. And then for some smaller flowers, you can make a circle or an oval. Now we're going to refine our guide. We're going to turn these triangles into flowers. So at the top of the triangle, you're going to draw a circle, and that is these flower stamen. And then just draw, for right now, just draw some lines going outward. Any circular flowers, you're going to put the stamen right in the center and then do a wheel of little lines going out. And then for these smaller flowers, we've got a big stamen, tiny petals. The idea here is, even though we're working with a small canvas, we want to capture the flower in its entirety, different sizes, different shapes, different angles. And so now that we've done that, we're going to join them all with stems, and the echinacea has fairly straight stems, and some of them are joined. So we want to make it look like some of these flowers' stems actually come together and meet. They've got tiny pointed leaves near the top, larger oval-shaped pointed leaves down towards the lower part of this drawing. And then you might, as you go along, realize, I want to add a few more small ones here. Now that our guide of the sketch is complete, we continue the refining process. And we are going to take those lines that we sketched out and turn them all into petals. So let's just pretend that the line is the center of each petal, and you're going to go around and draw a very perfectly imperfect petal around each line. So some petals will end with a bit of a point, others will end in a kind of squared off way. Make them messy, make them a little weird. And then for these smaller flowers, they've got a really large stamen and these tiny little rounded petals. Keep thinking perfectly imperfect. You want spaces between the petals. You do not want symmetry. With our guide, our sketch complete, let's reach for a fine liner. I'm using a mulatto black liner, 0.7 millimeter nib. All of my supplies are linked in the video description, so you can shop them on Amazon and support this channel and get the exact same stuff you see me using. I'm using my favorite sketchbook of all time today for this one. And I'm going around my sketch and I'm doing a contour drawing. So a contour drawing is just a line drawing. Think of a coloring book image. And what I'm doing here is I'm following the sketch that I laid out, but I'm making those petals even more perfectly imperfect. So making the ends kind of broken, wiggling the pen a little so that the lines are not too straight. We want everything to look as it does in nature, which is a little weird, a little funky. Now our flower has this wonderful large stamen at its center, and you've already sketched out a circle there or an oval. And now to complete the illustration, what we're going to do is fill in that shape with lots and lots of little lines, even some dots near the top. So you can see here how I'm going along and I'm doing row after row of tiny little lines, and that gives me a beautifully detailed looking stamen. So just come along that curving line and do a little row of short lines. And then you do row after row of these tiny short lines, all moving and shaped with that circle or those curved lines that you've sketched out. Make sure to come onto the petals a little bit slightly so that there's no break in the drawing. And that's all there is to it. It's just all about doing these rows of tiny curved lines, and they follow the shape of that circle, and you can make those tiny lines a little smaller as you reach the top of the stamen. Those lines may just even be dots. And for these smaller flowers, I really am just doing clusters of like messy lines, dots, scribbles. I'm not worrying too much about detail on some of the angled, tinier flowers. I'm going to start going over some of the stems and leaves as well to complete this contour drawing. You want to make sure that the stems are thick. You know, it's not just a single pen line. Make a double line there, and the stems are quite straight as well. They might go on an angle, but they are fairly straight. Just trying to capture the main details of the flower will ensure that when you're done, it does look like a cone flower, even if, you know, things aren't perfect. And I did my best to go over those border lines as well. Use a ruler or don't, you know, the choice is yours. Okay, with the contour drawing complete, let's grab an eraser and get rid of all those messy pencil lines. This is going to make a nice clean canvas for us to really see what we're working with, what we've created. And then we'll grab a smaller fine liner and we can start the process of shading this contour drawing. Do give your pen a minute to dry before you erase, by the way, BT dubs. And I've grabbed a relatively small nib, 0.3 millimeters, and I am starting the shading process by putting some thin, sort of broken lines down the center of each petal. The coneflower has sort of a textured looking petal. And then I also concentrate a few small angled lines near the stamen just to show that there's a little bit of a darkness there. If you look at the pink petals, the magenta color tends to be a little deeper right near the stamen. And then once we've done those shading lines on the petals, we are going to begin shading our leaves and stems. And I'm going to go for quite a dark leaf. I divide most of the leaves in half with a line, and then I place a whole bunch of little angled lines on each side of that center line. And you can see how I'm doing that there. And I'll normally make the lines a little more spread out on one side of the leaf. Just gives it a little bit of dimension. If shading with pen is totally new to you and this feels like it's going really fast, I can't recommend my illustration e-course enough. And right now you can get that pre-sale price. It will never be priced this low again. So grab it right now on my website and you will get access on October 1st when the course is complete. Head to my website, www.shaydacampbell.com. So I've shaded most of these leaves. I like to do the leaves really dark because it shows the difference in a black and white drawing between what is leaf and what is flower. So we've got these fairly light petals and then these dark leaves and stems. And with the leaves and stems shaded, standing back and looking at this, we could be done. But what I'd like to do now is add some more grass and brush kind of in behind. So I am using my 0.7 millimeter nib. So I've gone back to the larger pen and I'm just placing some little lines really in behind and all around the flowers and leaves. I want to make it look like these coneflowers are in a garden surrounded by grass and other brush. and some of the grass is kind of going off outside of the border of the square, just like the flowers. And then I'll switch back to my smaller pen and maybe just add a few more lines on some of the petals, continue shading until you're happy with it, until you feel like everything just looks good. Thicken up some leaves, do what you have to do. A few more little grass tufts here are going to be peeking out in behind the flowers. And then our first piece of art, our coneflower pen and ink illustration, is complete. We are done, and we are going to move right on to the next piece, because we got 3 to cover here. Okay, so we can't stop. I'm going to grab a little piece of tracing paper, and we are going to use this illustration, our first illustration, as the guide for our next 2 pieces of art. So the fun thing here is you do not have to draw this again. Now that you've got a beautiful design and illustration that you love, you can use it to make many, many multiple pieces of art. So if you want to experiment with new mediums, hi, here's Shayda with a great idea. Use a design, use a drawing that you're already comfortable with, that you already know inside out. Like this one, you just spent so much time with it. So now when you transfer it, you already know the shapes of these flowers. You know the drawing well. So if you want to use gouache or brush pen or acrylics or some medium that scares you, this is my recommendation. Use a drawing you're familiar with. For now, we're going to do a watercolor painting. So grab some paper. I'm using 140-pound cold pressed. I am taping my illustration trace on there. And then I'm placing a piece of graphite transfer paper dark side down underneath, and I am tracing over the entire image with a nice sharp mechanical pencil. So go over everything, lift up, make sure it's all there before you take that tape off. And voila, you basically have a coloring book image, and you can use whatever medium you like. Even if you're comfortable with watercolor, sometimes it all can be a little too much, even for me. It's hard to focus on layout and design and color mixing and brush strokes and painting a pretty picture. So having the image already there, well, now you get to focus on your colors, on your brush strokes. It removes one element. You know that you're happy with this design, and that can be very comforting. And if you need help illustrating and creating those designs, well, I just happen to have a new e-course coming out, and you got to run and get that pre-sale price, because the pre-sale price goes up in 2 weeks. Head over to shaydacampbell.com and get that illustration e-course. There's bundles available. If you haven't watched the watercolor e-courses, you can bundle all of it now for an incredible price. So yeah. Anywho, let's get back to this painting and talk about what we're actually doing. We've painted all the stamens there using some tiny linear brush strokes with yellow ochre and with a dark brown. And now I'm reaching for a beautiful magenta. I've mixed a little bit of magenta with dark purple or violet, and I've got this really beautiful pink color. And you can see for each petal, I use almost a different pink. So I'll go with a really concentrated mix of the paint, then I'll mix more water in for another petal, maybe work a little wet into wet, so that all the petals are not the exact same. And if you look up some coneflower or echinacea pictures online, you'll see that some have really dark petals, others are light, and the color of the petals changes even within one flower. So we're going for perfectly imperfect. We are not going for symmetry. And all you actually have to do is mix up a pink color that you like, and then just add a little bit more water to it so that you can grab from a really dark pink and then grab a lighter pink. Easy peasy. And then we are going to come in here with a green. So rinse that brush, pick up a nice dark warm green. I'm using green gray mixed with a little bit of brown and a little bit of indigo. And I am starting by using this relatively dark concentrated green to paint some stems, fill in some of these large oval shaped leaves that come to a bit of a point. And I want to have some really dark greens here, because eventually I'm going to fill in the backdrop with a lighter watery green, and I want the leaves and stems to stand out. So keep it fairly dark and concentrated, and just fill in just like you're coloring in a coloring book. Once that's done, we are going to take a wet brush, and you might have a very watery green on the brush, or even just water, and we are going to start filling in the whole square. So what I love about this little design that we've created is that a square or little rectangle just gives us this border. It makes creating a beautiful design really easy. And now what we're going to do is just fill in that square. So we're using a wet brush and just going over everything, and the colors will blend and blur. And you'll get a beautiful light green here. Sometimes you can see I'm using a light watery green. Up towards the top, I'm using basically just water, and it just has a little bit of a green tint because I've gone over, the leaves and the stems. And so I've filled in the whole square. I've got my you can really see the square now. And then I'm taking a little bit of light green and just doing some little grass lines up at the top, little wispy brush strokes. And along with those long grassy brush strokes, we're also just releasing a little bit of warm green into the wet areas so that it bleeds out, especially towards the bottom of the painting. And just use a nice warm green like green gray or olive brown or olive green. If you don't have a nice warm green, take a bright green like sap green and just mix in a little bit of red or brown. And I'm also going to use a bit of green to fill in the petals on the smaller flowers. Then rinse that little brush. I'm using a number 4 round brush. Grab some of that dark magenta, and we are going to do some shading on the petals. And it is not all that different from the shading we did with pen. We're doing thin, wispy lines. They are more concentrated, or there's more lines towards the stamen, towards the center of the flower. And all of that is helping with the coloration of the flower, as well as the depth and perspective. Next, I'm taking a little bit of dark brown and just adding some more little lines and dots on the stamen, on the center of the flower. And then we are almost done. We're so close. I'm using a bit of dark green to go over some of the stems and leaves, make sure they really pop on that green watery backdrop. And if they're not dark enough, you could even go in with a little bit of indigo and just do a dark blue right over top of some of the stems and leaves. So there she is, very pretty painting, all done, and it felt easy because of the transfer, the traced image. And we're gonna do it again. I'm coming back to my sketchbook here, my favorite sketchbook. Check the products in the description if you want the same one. We're gonna flip that page, use our trace. We can use the same trace, tape it in place, use that graphite transfer paper, place it dark side down, and then you're going to go over the image again with a nice sharp pencil. It does get harder the more you use the trace because you can't see like what you've already traced over. But just make sure before you untape it that everything you want to transfer is actually transferred, and you should be good to go. So this time we're going to work with pencil crayons, colored pencils, as you non-Canadians say. And I've got these Faber-Castell Polychromos. I just purchased them this summer and I'm just getting to know them. So for me, this is a fairly new medium, and that's what I love about having my illustration transferred and ready to go. I already have the design that I like. Now I can focus on playing with the pencil crayons. And the first thing I'm thinking about is mixing them. So for the petals, I did some magenta line shading there, and then I come in with a white pencil crayon and I'm kind of blending everything together. So the petals are going to be lighter at the ends, just like they were in the last 2 pieces of art that we created. And speaking of experimenting and trying new mediums and new things, let's do the next flower a little different. This time I'm going to start with the white and then go in with pink. I am going to use a lighter pink and just see what that looks like. And that creates a really interesting way of shading as well if you start with white and then go over it. So trying new things here. The nice thing is if you don't like what you create or you just think it could be better, just use that trace, transfer it one more time. You can use the same piece of tracing paper and the same piece of graphite transfer paper over and over again and create as many versions of this drawing as you like. I'm using a nice sharp dark green pencil here and going over all of these stems and leaves, just like we did with watercolor, coloring everything in fairly dark. One thing I'm going to do with the pencil crayon that I didn't do with the other 2 drawings is I'm going to leave some of the flowers at just a contour drawing. So if you remember, a contour drawing is a drawing without any shading, no coloring in, no lines. And that's what I'm going to do just for some of these, just to create a more interesting piece. So this flower over here on the left is going to just be a contour drawing. So I went over the stems and leaves with green, going around the petals with pink, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Did you know I release an extra tutorial on the first weekend of the month over on my Patreon? This month we're painting watercolor trees, and it's a wonderful lesson. If you want to get access to all the bonus content, head to patreon.com/Shayda Campbell and prioritize your creative me time with worksheets, coloring pages, and extra videos sent directly to your inbox every week. Okay, let's keep going. I decided I will use a little bit more of that darker magenta on this second flower. This flower on the right is just going to be another contour drawing. And then I'm taking a lighter green and I'm going to start filling in some of the leaves as well as the background. I'm using a light green and a dark green, and really I'm just scribbling, and the effect isn't all that different from what we got with the watercolor, using dark green and a watery green and doing a bit of wet into wet, except this time I'm just scribbling. Then we'll grab an orange or a light brown and we'll do a few small lines at the top of some of the stamens, and then reach for a darker brown and fill in the remainder of the stamen with those dark brown little lines and dots. For the flowers that I am just doing a contour drawing, I just did a little brown scribble around the perimeter of the stamen. I'm going to fill in the petals of these smaller flowers. Some of them I'm using light green mixed with a little brown. Some I'm using my magenta. And then I'm going to reach for that light green again. And just like the other two pieces of art that we created, we're going to fill in the upper area with these long, thin, wispy grass-like brush. I was going to say brush strokes, but just draw long, thin lines, maybe a few leaves. I would just say be sure to leave more negative space in the upper left corner. But other than that, add as many long bits of grass and scribbles as you like. It's so much like the watercolor where we've used light green and then we've gone in with darker green for the leaves and stems. So you can tell what everything is, but it's still messy and grassy and natural and beautiful. And that brings us to the completion of this third piece of art. Now all we need to do is go over the border. So I am going to use a ruler for this, use a thicker fine liner, something like a 0.9 or even a 1 millimeter nib, and just go over that entire pencil line, making sure you don't go right over a flower, because that's the beauty of this, is we have these striking black lines and then we have these loose floral shapes moving off and out of that rigid border. And then after carefully completing those black borders, go ahead and sign your work. And that's that. We are done. 3 pieces of art, 3 different mediums complete. Thanks for following along and watching today. I hope you'll give this a try because it's a wonderful and very comfortable way to try out new mediums without the added stress of design and layout. Be sure to subscribe right now for more content like this, and then head over to my website, shaydacampbell.com, to get that illustration e-course at the pre-sale price. Course will be released October 1st. And finally, if you want the supplies, I started out today working in my favorite Strathmore colored pencil sketchbook. I use mulatto black liners, they're good fine liners. I use tracing paper, graphite transfer paper. I reached for my favorite Mungyo 48 pan watercolor set and used a couple of Velvet Touch round brushes from Princeton. And the final piece was done with the Faber-Castell colored pencils and that same Strathmore sketch pad.